A person starts fighting a lot of small, ugly creatures using a sword under the moon. These creatures chase someone in a carriage. Warriors appear and save the person by killing the creatures. Later, a guy named Fate guards a house. He watches warriors happily talking about beating those small creatures. Fate feels bad because he's not successful due to eating too much. His stomach growls loudly. In the evening, some important knights enter a city. A man drops fruit near Hato's foot. Hato and Memel bully the man, saying he disrespected them. They hurt him. Later, the knights throw money at Fate and make him pick it up. They step on his hands, mock him, and beat him. Lady Roxy stops them, scolds the knights, and helps Fate. She tells him to report if it happens again. Fate goes to a store to eat bread. The shopkeeper warns him not to end up like others. He thinks about Valoric's cruelty, Lady Roxy's kindness, and his own problems. He sees bandits and tells Lady Roxy. She leaves him in charge. A bandit comes of him, but he fights and kills the bandit. His gluttony skill activates, giving him new abilities. Lady Roxy thanks him and offers him a job. Fate accepts. Later, he wonders about his powers. The next day, he uses coins to buy a sword. The sword talks to him and convinces him to buy it. The Valorics talk about Fate leaving. Memel hates Lady Roxy, but Raphael thinks they shouldn't ruin relationships. Memel asks about Raphael's research on immortality. Fate wanders with his sword. He kills a goblin, and his gluttony skill activates, making him stronger. More goblins come, but he defeats them skillfully. The sword tells Fate out gluttony skills and warns him not to let others know. The sword pledges to be Fate's partner. Fate decides to use coins for food, but the sword wants him to use them to get stronger. Fate meets a man mistreating a little girl. The girl asks for help, and Fate plans to save her. The sister is teaching kids about skills from Lord Laplace. Kids think it's not fair that holy knights have powerful skills while others get weak ones. Another sister comes, saying Sahara is missing, and goes to the city. Now Sahara is tied up and crying. Fate frees her, but the bad guy is still there. Fate grabs the girl, hides, and fights the bad guy. He asks who's behind it, and the bad guy says it's Hato Valeric. Fate takes the girl for food. She enjoys her first meat meal. Fate takes her to the sisters. Greed tells Fate about his new skill, Sharp Edge, which could have killed him against the bad guy. Greed reminds Fate about his first day at work. At a bar, someone talks about Lord Mason's death and how Lady Roxy can't stop the Holy Knight's tyranny. Next morning, Fate goes to House of Heart. Lady Roxy takes him to her father's grave. He learns her father died 5 days ago. She asks him to help make the house lively again. She wants to shake his hand, but he refuses because he doesn't want to read her mind. A week later, Fate fits in at work. His colleagues wonder why he's hungry after lunch. Miss Haru calls him to meet Lady Roxy. She calls him Faye and treats him like family. While talking, Fate faints. He wakes up with a note to take a day off. Greed tells him his body is changing. He'll crave souls and starve if he doesn't kill. His eyes turn red at the limit. That night, Fate kills goblins to avoid starving. He kills a giant goblin, getting a self-healing skill. Greed says Fate can upgrade him with stats. Fate agrees, and the upgraded sword turns into a bow. He practices shooting arrows at goblins. Fate stops Roxy at the gate. She's in disguise for a secret inspection. Fate doesn't recognize her. She invites him to join her on the journey. They go to the city, and Roxy asks Fate to call her Lexi for the day. Greed teases them, and Fate tells Greed to be quiet. Roxy thinks Fate told her to be quiet and apologizes. Fate clarifies, and they continue the inspection. Roxy wants to see Fate's sword, but he's worried she'll know who he is. She doesn't find out. They go to the market and taste grapes. Roxy accidentally says the grapes are from her house, making the vendor suspicious. Fate covers for her. A holy knight arrives and hears Fate's stomach growl. He tries to intimidate Fate, but Roxy steps in. The holy knight almost realizes Roxy is a holy knight. They pretend to be a couple, and Roxy scolds Fate for not eating her breakfast. They link arms, and Fate reads her mind, pulling back. They see a vendor selling lucky stones. Fate uses his appraisal skill to check one and finds it's fake. Roxy returns the stone, and they leave. Roxy asks about an incident, but people suggest talking to a warrior. Fate takes her to a bar. They learn a monster might have killed goblins. Roxy gets harassed, but she teaches the warriors a lesson, and they apologize when they realize she's a holy knight. Later, they see the Valerics harassing a boy. Roxy frees him, and they feed him. They can't find his mother, so they offer him to stay at Roxy's house. The mother arrives, and Fate worries Roxy might recognize him. The next day, Fate goes to the market, buys a mask, and an ore with a blue gem. He gifts it to Roxy. The story shifts to the Holy Knights having a meeting. The warriors find Fate in disguise, standing over dead goblins. They call him Corpse and run away. Back at the Hart House, Roxy asks Fate to join her on a secret mission. They go to the Hart family vineyards, where Roxy's mother asks if Fate likes her. Fate says he cares about Roxy, making her shy, and she runs to her room. In her room, Roxy thinks about her father, who inspired her to become a holy knight. She goes out with Fate to harvest grapes. A worker tells Fate about the seasonal harvest and monsters attacking, and Roxy defends the vineyard against kobolds. That evening, Fate sees a girl with red eyes. Unable to use his appraisal skill on her, she leaves the kobolds to him. Roxy arrives, claiming the girl is Galia. Fate asks her about fighting kobolds, and Roxy reassures him. The next morning, the vineyards are destroyed. Roxy, Fate, and warriors trace their location. They see a stronger kobold, level 50. Fate feels deep hunger. Roxy promises to defeat the beast and prepares for the fight. That night, Fate begins slaying the kobolds. Greed transforms into a bow, taking out lower-level kobolds. The beast grabs arrows, rendering them useless. The beast punches Fate, who pretends to be dead, and kills another kobold. Greed says he can use his first-level arts for 10% of his stats. Fate transforms Greed, defeating the kobold and having a stroke. The warriors find the dead kobolds and the crater. Roxy informs her mother, who's happy the monsters are gone, but notices the destruction. She suspects Galia did it. Roxy's mother asks Fate to support Roxy. Back in the capital, Fate learns goblins won't be enough. Hado joins the hunt for Corpse. Fate overhears the Galleon expedition and Roxy's assignment. Fate asks her not to go, but she's determined. The Vleriks want to get rid of the Hart family. Fate faces Hado and warriors hunting for Corpse. Hado faces off against Fate. He sends his warriors to attack, but Fate easily defeats them, and the rest run away. Fate then confronts Hado. Fate reveals his face, surprising Hado. Hado uses a holy sword attack, but Fate dodges it. Fate talks to Greed before slicing Hado's sword. He questions Hado about the harm he caused to innocent people before slamming him into trees. Using his special attack, Fate blows Hado to pieces, leaving only his body. Fate asks about Roxy's mission. Hado pleads to cancel the expedition, but Fate kills him. Roxy gets ready for her trip to Galia, promising to meet them in 3 years. Fate leaves the House of Heart to become a warrior. Haru gives him his pay and severance pay. Roxy gives a speech to the warriors going to Galia and meets Miria and Mugen. Rene researches the monsters slain by Corpse. The wounds aren't normal arrow wounds, but magic arrows from the Black Sword. They think about its powers. Fate arrives at Tetra City, asking for a ride to Galia for the next day. He does research and eats at a restaurant. He sees warriors bullying a man asking for help with monsters. Fate teaches them a lesson and recognizes the man as Set. He remembers Set bullying him in the village and being kicked out by Set's father. Despite this, Fate agrees to help the village fight monsters on Set's request. In the village, Set's father dislikes Fate, suggesting sacrificing Set to buy time for more warriors. Set supports Fate and takes him home. Set, changed after his daughter's birth, talks about the monsters and shares an idea to fight them. Set's daughter plays with Fate and gives him candy. During dinner, Fate suddenly faints. Set asks about suspicious food, and his daughter reveals her grandfather gave Fate candy. Set fears his grandfather is serious about sacrificing Fate. Monsters attack the village, causing damage while Fate is unconscious. Set prepares an antidote to wake Fate up. Fate, armed with his scythe, fights and gains the fireball skill. He defeats the leader too. The next morning, they see the damage and decide to move to the village. Set asks Fate to punch him to be even. Fate visits his father's grave before heading to Galia. The cart driver offers 3 gold coins for protection. Goons threaten to steal, but an axe scares them away. Maine appears and they travel together. Maine eats Fate's jerky. They ride in Lancaster. Lord Rudolph pretends to save a girl from monsters. Fate learns Roxy hasn't arrived. Rudolph executes 2 men for small reasons. Fate takes Maine to rest. Greed reveals Maine's weapon is a weapon of mortal sin. Greed tells Fate about mortal sins and insists on improving strength. At night, they hunt monsters. Greed wants Fate to fill himself slowly. Fate fights and takes out a sand golem using the fireball skill. He sees a stronger golem but waits. Maine wakes up, sees a reward poster for the sand golem, and watches warriors fight a stronger one. Fate attacks and uses bloody ptarmigan to defeat it. Warriors appreciate his strength, and he introduces himself as Corpse. At home, Maine gets mad that Fate took down the golems without her. They go for the reward, and Rudolph commands them to work for him. Maine sends him flying with her weapon.